Hello, folks. Good to see you again. I know it's been a couple of weeks since last I've sent a message to you um, and talked to you via video, and it's just been, well, it's been busy for all of us. So I have been reading through your poems, though, that you've submitted. I'm really happy with what I'm finding. I think you guys are doing a great job. Good enough that I do want to encourage you to submit your poetry, your fiction, your creative nonfiction. Think about submitting it to Calliope. That's the student creative journal that's produced on the Armstrong campus. I think it's a great opportunity to get your first publications. And it gives you the experience of putting together your portfolio or your manuscripts for publication and submitting them, and it's just the entire process. So it's kind of a good start to that. What I'd like to talk to you today about is kind of quickly review what we've gone over already the first few weeks, because as we move into fiction and creative nonfiction, you're going to be using the same elements that you've already picked up and started using in your poetry. And I want you to keep working on these things because you are going to be turning in a portfolio at the end of the semester, and you're required to have a revised portfolio, meaning I want you to go back through the poems, revise at least once. Twice is better, so that it'd be 3 versions altogether. So maybe you do one revision based on the comments from your group workshop, then maybe do another revision based on some comments that you get from me, and then maybe even do a last revision as you go through and make sure that you have punctuation, spelling, grammar. All those things count. Even though it's poetry, that doesn't give you a bye for using correct grammar, punctuation, and spelling. You still need to use that even if it's just poetry. All right, you don't have poetic license to not use it unless you're trying to make some kind of larger point about words and the way words work, and some kind of a statement you're trying to make. But if it's just because you don't want to use the punctuation or capitalization or spelling, that doesn't work. All right, everything counts in poems and in fiction and in creative nonfiction. So let's review just quickly. We talked about imagery, the importance of imagery, and how imagery sets up the reader by supplying the words that are connected to concrete objects, not objects that are figurative or are in the sense of abstract terms. So terms like beautiful or lovely or true or good or bad, all those terms are terms that there's no kind of image that goes along with them, or there are multiple images that can go along with them. So what you want to do is you want to control those images by using concrete nouns that will allow the reader to create a picture in their mind of what you're talking about. And also remember that that you want to use active verbs, because again, active verbs are verbs that the word themselves, the verb, actually has the action in it. So go, for example, is not an action verb like run or dash or sprint or walk, right? See, all those words tell the reader exactly what is that action being taken. So you want to use action verbs, not passive verbs. And passive verbs mostly come in the form of the to be verbs, meaning is, was, were, has been, to be. Those are all passive verbs. So stay away from the passive verbs. Stick to the active verbs. Finally, cut as many articles as you can. Articles including a and the and an, right? Those, again, are words that, unless they're absolutely needed for understanding of the poem, then you can cut them out. Compression is a huge part of poetry, right? But it's also a huge part of fiction writing, good nonfiction writing. We also talked about voice, and we talked about how you can develop your voice over time through writing, right? And so this voice is a writer's voice. It's not necessarily the voice you use when you're talking to everybody on the streets or when you meet your friends. It can be that voice, depending on how you're approaching your fiction or your creative nonfiction. But it's a voice that, since you're using the written language, you have more time than you do when you're just having a conversation to really pick out the diction, which means word choice, pick out those words and put them together in a way that's going to be clear and allow the reader to follow the storyline or the narrative that you have. Then we talked about poetic devices. Some of them include metaphor, simile, the poetic line, meaning how the line is put together. And so you can translate this or transfer this over to fiction, because oftentimes when we're writing fiction, we're looking at the line length of a sentence. We want to have kind of a variety of those when we're writing our stories, so there's not boring. We want to have shorter sentences and longer sentences, the medium sentence. So when I say shorter sentence, let's say anything under 6 words, 7 words, right? That's a kind of a short sentence. Medium sentences maybe from anywhere from 5, 6 to 14 or 15 words, and longer sentences would be 12 to 20 words, maybe more. Excuse me. So you want to think about that too, because that creates a pace that the reader's going through, and you want to be able to kind of control that pace. There are certain parts of your story that you'll want to move more quickly through. There are certain parts of the story you want to kind of slow down and have your reader kind of be more reflective during those parts. We talked about the density of the poem and the intensity of the words. And the same thing, it's kind of just what I talked about with the sentence links, right? You can control that. And finally, the sounds. The sounds of the words matter. We don't get meaning by just what we read in a dictionary that says this word means this. The meaning also goes along with the sound of the word, the actual tone that comes in the word. When I say poke, that's different than prod, which is different than stick, right? Each one of those has different sounds that go with it, and you can kind of feel the meaning change just slightly, because and it affects the way we say that. If you think about it, when I say poke and I say prod and I say stick, right? It even changes our facial features. And so even though our readers may not be reading it out loud, those facial movements are attached to the words we say. So when we say them, even if we're saying them quietly to ourselves, it has a physical effect on our reader. All right, so don't forget those. We also, spend a little bit of time on critiques and critiquing. This is your first kind of foray into that. Here's a couple of words about critiquing. I kind of already mentioned this, but remember, you're looking for specific areas in the writer's work that you think can be improved, that you think are working, meaning they really came together for you as a reader and you didn't have any problem at all with kind of understanding or making connections between them. It all worked for you. And then you're also looking, more importantly, for those parts of the story or the poem or the creative nonfiction piece that are not working, that maybe you get a little confused at. Maybe there were areas where you thought that the wording could be better expressed. Maybe there's places where you thought a metaphor could be used to kind of express the idea even better, or a simile. Maybe they can bring in more colors, especially when we get into settings. We're going to be talking a lot about setting in this and how important setting is. A lot of writers don't understand the importance of setting when it comes to telling stories. So we'll talk some more about that. So let's talk this week. We're focusing on character, and for most stories and most readers, the character is the most important part of the story, right? If we love the character, normally we'll love the story, as long as we could put the character into situations and scenes that create conflict for the character. Stories are boring essentially because nothing happens to the character, right? If you think of the movies you like, or the stories you've read that really you get 20, 30 pages in and you're just like, I don't know, I'm kind of bored here. It's probably because there's not much going on about the character or to the character. So that's an important part of telling the story, is figuring out what the conflict is going to be and then coming to a resolution in that conflict. But the most important thing about the character is that you need to figure out what the character's desire is, right? So when I talk about desire, what I'm talking about is that just like every human, there's a principal a goal or dream that characters have. There's a kind of a physical desire, and then there's the internal desire. And these desires sometimes match up, sometimes they're not exactly matching up, sometimes they're in conflict with each other. So say if my desire is to be a good and honest person, and I'm the character, there's a character and a good and honest person, but uh, that gets mixed up with I also have a desire to succeed, and that desire to succeed um, makes me leads me into some dishonesty. Now there's a conflict going on between my external and my internal desire, which makes for a good story again, because a lot of us are caught up in that kind of drama at times, right? So desire is going to be one of the most important aspects that we want to uh, kind of flesh out in the characters. And there's going to be, I think, there's a character sketch that I'm going to have you do where you're going to write out kind of the psychology of your character. You're going to write out the entire kind of biography of your main character. So you're going to tell us how old they are, what's their education, do they have parents, are the parents still alive, do they have siblings, do they have a job, are they working at that job, how long have they been at the job, are they married, or do they have children? Um, uh, and then you're going to dig deeper into kind of psychology, what is it that they most want in their lives? What is it that they're striving to get to? Um, uh, what is the outward appearance that is given to the people around them, but what is their internal appearance of themselves? Because those things can be very different, and in fact, often they are. That what we show to other people on the outside is not really what we feel necessarily on the inside about ourselves. And that's both, I mean, both in a bad way and in a good way. In other words, we might feel like we're uh, more worthy of some respect than we feel like people are giving us. And maybe they're giving us that less respect because we don't deserve it, but maybe we do deserve it. And so you see how that sets up nice complications for our character. I also ask you to get a fine description of the character, the physical parts of the character. What kind of color hair do they have? Their eyes. Do they have any distinctive characteristics about their physical features? They have a scar, do they wear earrings, do they have glasses that they wear, anything that kind of will set them apart and make them individual. The more individual you can make your character, the more you can kind of describe that character in detail to the reader, the more the reader is going to fall in love with that character because the reader will actually know the character then. So we're just like in poetry, though, we're going to use images, okay? And images we're going to be using to particularly the image of the character, but also the image of the setting around the character. And like I said, we're going to be talking about setting and the importance of setting and the importance of using setting to set the tone and the mood of the story. And it's very, very important because we don't want to be telling readers all the time, the character's sad, the character's happy, the character's exuberant, right? In fact, we'd rather not be telling the readers anything. We want to show the character through actions, through the voice of the character, which we can get through dialogue. We can also get through this internal thoughts they have, but that will be kind of showing the reader about that character's, their voice, what kind of voice they project out, and which is much better than trying to tell them the kind of voice they have. All of this, we want to stay away from telling in here. We want to show everything we can through use of dialogue, through use of the action that goes on. Once we set a scene, right? Once we have a scene. Stories are made up of scenes. So we go from scene to scene to scene in a story. And each of those scenes are in a different place. So the first scene may open up in a living room and two people are talking and they're having discussion about some future event that's going to happen. They finish their discussion there and the main character gets up and leaves the room and maybe drives to work. And so the next scene that opens up is them walking into their job at work. And then there's a scene there the character talking to their boss, and that scene goes on. There's some action, there's some talk. That scene ends, and the character has to go off because he had a phone call, and there's emergency has come up, and he has to leave. So he quickly leaves the office. Maybe the next scene is in the car, and they're driving the car, and there's a internal dialogue quickly going on because what the call was about was their child was in an accident and they need to get there quickly. And so the next scene then is we're at the accident scene. So each one of these scenes, you need to develop a setting for that scene, which is telling in detail what you see, the significant things you're seeing that the character can see. And again, you're using concrete nouns, action verbs to show that. We're also going to show the character's voice through that action that they take. How do they act? How do they react? What's their body movements? What's their body language during that? What are their thought processes that are having the internal dialogue that's going on? And then we want to take that character and put them in a conflict. There has to be conflict to make the story interesting. Always conflict. Think about in The Hobbit, when we have Frodo, he has an internal conflict almost from the beginning, because all along he keeps not wanting to be the hero. He's kind of the reluctant hero. So he keeps and he thinks he doesn't have the strength. He's not strong enough to do it himself. He keeps second guessing his strength. And in fact, he doesn't have the strength to do it alone. That's why he needs Sam to help him. At the end, we find out that's part of the overall theme of the story, is that we need other people. We need friends to help us through hard times. So as you go through, you're going to find out what that overall theme of your story is, and you'll want to keep that in mind as you're writing the story. And so, other characters we'll have there, we have stock characters, which are and flat characters. So these are characters that maybe are not going to play a big role. So, if there's an overall bad guy in the story, he may have one or two kind of lieutenants or right-hand people that are working for them. Then there's going to be other characters around them, the henchmen, as it were, and maybe you'll give them a name, but you're not going to spend as much time developing those characters. But you do want to develop the antagonist, the person that's going against the hero, or the protagonist. You want to develop that character well too, right? We want to know that villain, right? Well, if we don't, well, then they're just kind of a stock, flat character that we can just place, and it takes a lot of the beauty of the story away. The more interesting the opponent is, the more interesting the main character is, right? If they have a really strong opponent, well, then that makes their success, if they succeed in whatever adventure they're on, whatever journey they're on during the story, then it makes their success even stronger. So we'll read over the materials that I have in these units, watch the videos, and I think you're going to have a much better concept of what we're talking about here. So I'm working on finishing reading your poems again, and getting comments back to you. I will try to do that, have that done by Friday. If not, well, then Monday you'll have that back to you, okay? This coming Monday. I'm going out of town. My nephew's getting married, so I'm going to North Carolina to visit him. So I won't be doing work over the weekend, but I am going to be reading through those the rest of today. And tomorrow, I have some time tomorrow. I'm teaching tomorrow, but I will have time in the afternoon. So hopefully I can get them done by Friday, early the afternoon. But if not, they'll be in by Monday. Okay, so make sure you're doing your reading. The book has wonderful material in there to help you to understand the importance of all these elements that I'm talking about here. Again, thank you so much for the great work you're doing in the class. I'm really proud of the poems you're turning in, the work you're doing this semester, and so keep it up, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.